Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. Today, we're talking to Chris Finlan. And Chris works on the Power BI team for quite some time, where he's launched the Power BI report server, paginated reports inside of Power BI, and very recently, the premium per user. So we're going to talk to him about all of these topics. Where does paginated reports fit in? Where are we taking it going forward? What's the vision? How do we think about it? So it's going to be very interesting. And we're going to ask him lots of questions and learn about paginated reports and how they fit into Power BI. So with that, let's go to the episode. All right, so hi, Chris. I'm honored to
Hey,
have you here today on
thank
Kasper
you.
On
I'm honored to be
BI
here.
to talk about paginated reports and to learn about all these things. I've known you for many years.
Yep.
Even before you joined the Power BI team. So
Mhm.
you had a very interesting story joining the team and joining Microsoft. You had a lot of
Yep.
learnings on BI, a lot of talking to customers. So maybe you can share a bit about yourself and also about the journey you had to get to the Power BI team.
Sure. Sure. So I joined. So I was working actually at SAP. I worked at SAP almost a decade as a business analyst, and I was proudly shadow IT. And so I was the guy who used Microsoft solutions to get things done. And so that included, reporting services. It included Excel and Power Pivot. It included creating a line of business apps. And I used a program called Visual Studio Lightswitch, which actually some of the engineers in the Power BI team used to work on Lightswitch. A guy named
Oh,
Doug.
yeah.
Yeah, he worked on Lightswitch. So I loved that product, and I used it so much and talked to the product team here at Microsoft about it. And I was on a podcast called .NET Rocks, where I talked all about my experience building stuff with Visual Studio Lightswitch at SAP for different groups. And one of the representatives in the field for Microsoft, because the field office was based out of Malvern, though SAP's headquarters, North American headquarters, is outside Philadelphia, and Malvern's a town outside Philadelphia. Um, Heard me on the podcast and said, "Hey, send me a note saying, hey, I would love to connect, just chat with you." So he came over to the SAP office, a guy named Tim. We met for about 30, 45 minutes, just a chance to chat and things that were going on. And so in 2013, I was looking for a change, and I reached out to Tim saying, "Hey, is there anything in the field office there?" And actually, a role had come up, which was a pre-sales engineer around business intelligence and SQL Server on the team out of Malvern. So I interviewed for it. I got the job, and so for the next 2 years, I talked about Power BI in Office 365 with customers, which is the version of Power BI that you never hear about anymore. But it was there, and I had to try and sell it, and it was very challenging. But we did that for a couple of
I
years.
was
Talked
there
about
on the
SQL
other
Server
side.
and
It
others.
was very
Yeah,
challenging to build too.
yes, I can imagine. There was a ton of things that were challenging about that, and then there was the cost, and it was a different time in terms of cloud adoption. So it was a very, very interesting journey. But one of the things that came out of that was Microsoft acquired a company called Datadriven, which was a dashboarding visualization technology, which very heavily mobile solution, which we didn't have at the time, was a mobile app. I won't get into too many details, but I was part of the reason why we acquired that company. And so the gentleman, Milian, who was the head over there, brought me onto the Power BI product team in 2015. And I moved my family out to Seattle. And then when the decision was made to integrate the Datadriven technology into reporting services for the 2016 release, I was moved over to be the PM leading that effort, working with Ricardo Muti, who you know. And you were on the AS side along with Kai. So it was the four of us driving the 2016 release as part of the Pro BI umbrella. And, I learned a ton. And then I've basically been on that team ever since that time, working with reporting services and paginated reports.
Yeah, it was a good time. So
Yeah.
today, your role at the Power BI team is?
Yeah. So I'm the principal program manager, in charge of the reporting services business all up. So if you think about the on-prem pieces, either SQL Server reporting services or Power BI report server and all the tools that go with that, that's me. And then if paginated reports is us are manifesting that technology into the Power BI service, Power BI cloud service, and the journey there is all an area that me and the engineering team own. We also own managed distribution for Power BI all up. So if you think about email subscriptions, which is a big part of reporting services, And then some of the
Yeah.
export scenarios like export to PowerPoint or export to PDF. We own the screenshot service that powers that platform that kind of powers all those scenarios. And, the birth of the kind of the growth of that area has taken off quite a bit. When I took that over a couple of years ago and added scheduling for subscriptions, I mean, the growth there has gone, exponentially up over the last few years. I mean, we were handling, 10 to 15 times the volume we were handling just, 2018 or something like that. So it's been great and it's been exciting, and it's a great engineering team to work with. Been working with a lot of these folks for the last several years, so really enjoy it. And things have been,
It's
and there's a
actually
few other
pretty.
things that I've. Yeah.
It's actually pretty remarkable because that team was there. A lot of them were there when I joined
Mhm.
Microsoft in 2010. Like,
Yeah,
still the same guys. I mean, it's pretty
yeah,
amazing, and that really is a testament to how much they love the product and working for it. I think in Microsoft that's rather special. Actually, I think a lot of
yeah.
organizations is rather special.
Yes, and it's very difficult to find people with that level in-depth product knowledge about reporting services, and then there's a lot of very challenging code in that product that I am not the foremost expert on. I've been with the product for a while, but there's engineers who've worked on that for years, and not only in that team, but even on the broader Power BI team. If you think about some of the architects on other teams, they've worked on different parts. They built stuff in Report Builder, built stuff in reporting services, and it is a testament. I think it's a great team to work with. There's a reason why I've stuck with them and worked with them this long, and I truly enjoy my job and working with that team on a daily basis, and all the customers that are so passionate about the product.
Yeah, it's about time that everything opens up and I can roam the hallways again and go talk to everyone. That would be nice.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk paginated reports. So paginated reports
Mhm.
obviously are everything that we know and love from SSRS. A lot of the features move into Power BI, but I mean it's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
SSRS
been around 17, 18 years at this point. Yeah,
yeah, it's
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 been
it's
around
pretty
a long time.
it's pretty incredible. And then but like it's kind of a interesting shift of bringing that into Power BI, because Power BI is of course all brand new and
Mhm.
JavaScript and flashy and interactive and all of these things.
We can be
Paginated,
flashy.
Paginated is little bit less flashy, but that's okay. I mean, because there is
Yeah,
definitely a need for it. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about the positioning.
sure. So and bringing the reports into Power BI, Power BI is very much built on the heritage of analysis services, tabular analysis services engine and Power Pivot, and that history that's been around over about a decade, and very much designed for analytic scenarios. Slicing and dicing, working with a ton of information, and really digging through that and pulling out net new insights or things you may not have known about your data, and bringing it together from different places into a highly tuned model. Paginated reports, and they were often referred to as operational reports in the past. You're thinking about I gave an example just the other day where you and I go and we'll enter vacation time into Microsoft and we'll run a report.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's a paginated report. It's SSRS behind the scenes. Dynamics, another example of especially Dynamics and the ERP stuff there, when you're talking about a lot of business documents that you're going and generating invoices and billing statements and things like that. That's all paginated reports, and it's a very different paradigm because there is no concept of a data model. It was definitely designed very differently. It was optimized for use with SQL Server tables, and if you think about some people would argue, well, it's like, well, you can't use that for this type of slicing and dicing, and you shouldn't. But if the things you can do with it, like you can connect directly to a data source, you can connect directly to multiple Power BI models, and use query parameters to go and pull results across 6 or 7 models and surface it in a single report. People often want to do that with, say, a dashboard. Well, you can actually do that with an
You
operational
write your own
report.
queries.
Barely. Yeah, you write your own queries. Everybody loves writing their own DAGs. Um,
SQL,
but
SQL.
yeah, no. I mean, I am T-SQL all the way. But if you're, I was talking about Power BI models, but you think about these for the longest time, people were kind of like this. It was this either or, like you either had to use one or the other, and there was no in between. And Rob Colley, who I've known for a long time, I know you've known for a long time, he was very much on the other side of the fence when it came to paginated reports. Like, that's old. Nobody. Why would you ever need to use that? And even he's come around to this and wrote, I think, one of the best blog series I've read on, hey, these aren't an either or. These are things that should be used together, and they really do complement each other. And as more people have kind of come to that understanding, and there isn't this kind of political nonsense around, oh, you have to use one or the other, or somehow it's old and not useful. I mean, when I was in the field, I was like, oh, don't ever talk about reporting services because it's not sexy and exciting, get people excited. But it's funny. I mean, I know we're going to talk about later about premium per user, but if you went and talked to the people who were most excited, or the reason why they were looking for premium per user amongst the Microsoft community, it was for paginated reports. It was the top rated item for that because it was such a vital part of their overall reporting strategy and business intelligence strategy.
Yeah, makes ton of sense. And when I started in BI, I was doing SSRs reports too, and we were using them all the time. And it was definitely more of a flat files and it was for hospital where I was working for, and just printing out patients and their information and their stats and things like this. I mean, it's perfect for it. I mean, you cannot do it with Power BI, and that's really why.
And it's not optimized for it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want pages and pages and pages of stuff in Power BI. That's not going to work, and you can't print it. You cannot do anything with it. So that is
and people often associate print like somehow we're not killing trees anymore, but there's a lot of scenarios where you need a PDF for regulatory reasons, and just getting that highly formatted PDF, pixel perfect is often an adjective used with paginated reports. And guess what? Like, I've talked to countries and companies that are like, we have to have it with this pixel size in this location per government regulations, or we can't submit it. And there's a lot of work that's been done over the years to really optimize for those scenarios. And people often are like, well, paginated reports is just for printing and these things. There's a ton you can do with it. I mean, extensibility and embedding it in applications is actually like the top use case for SSRS and embedding that technology into people's applications, because oftentimes, not only does it provide reporting, but they need those business documents scenarios to take care of. So it absolutely has a place, and it's a vital part of any strategy. And I'm excited that more and more people are kind of coming around to that and really adopting it in Power BI in a fairly significant way.
Yeah, makes total sense. So again, kind of going back to like SSRS or paginated reports have a long history. There's so much stuff you can do with it. I remember writing my own DLL to do something with authentication in reporting services 2010 or 12, or I don't know exactly when it was, but
2008 R2 if it's 2010.
Exactly, I was 2008 R2. And I mean, there's so much things, but that obviously is not possible in Power BI. So people want parity.
Yes.
What do we usually
Well, they say they want parity. Yeah, I mean, they say they want parity, and of course that's, and the SQL Server team, which obviously reporting services is a big part of the SQL Server value proposition, as is analysis services. They've dealt with this for a decade. I mean, you think about what was at one point SQL Azure and is now Azure SQL database. Trying to move people to that has been, a many year journey. And then you think about Azure SQL managed instance, like it's moving people to the cloud and having that exact same functionality in the cloud is very challenging. And, there was a version of reporting services in the cloud previously. Windows Azure reporting services, and it wasn't around very long. And that was the first, but that was the first attempt. Yeah, that was the first attempt to bring that to the cloud. And so now Power BI was not built with reporting services in mind at all. It was built with analysis services in mind. And so bringing that functionality, there's the functionality for the report type itself, which is a more contained surface area. And we've been very focused on the last couple of years, trying to bring that to full parity with on-prem. We're pretty close. There's a couple of things like drill through that aren't quite there yet. But if you think about the server side capabilities, that's where that's going to be a longer journey, and there's going to be certain things that just don't translate. I mean, think about how content is organized in reporting services, folders,
Yeah.
and all the security that you have across your different assets in the folders and the nested folders. None of that exists in Power BI, and that in and of itself is enough for a lot of companies to say, I'm not doing anything. And that's a long tail. It'll take us a lot of time, and there's going to be certain things that won't be full parity, or it'll be a migrated, modernized versus lift and shift. For lift and shift, we went and we actually,
folders will never really come to Power BI as we know it.
not the same way. I mean, there may be some semblance of folders at some point, but if you think about, we went and published, actually both the AS and RS team went and published a bunch of Azure VM images for people who want pure lift and shift. Like if you want pure lift and shift, those Azure VM images are out there now, and you can just move to those or just spin that up if that's what you're looking for to go into the cloud first. And that was at the behest of the SQL team, because they talked to us about, hey, this is the way customers are moving their assets. It takes time. Like they're willing to go to the cloud first and just quickly do lift and shift by spinning up a VM, and then over time they'll migrate those assets to the PaaS and SaaS services. So, and again, we see that exact same pattern. Power BI has been very successful, so there's a ton of interest in doing that, but they're, as long as a few things aren't there, they're like, I can't shut my server down until you have everything there. So it's a journey.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe one thing that is also, and we kind of touched upon it already, but one thing that is being used a lot for SSRS or Paginated is subscriptions, data-driven subscriptions. And I've even heard some Power BI customers that are running SSRS on-prem just for the data-driven subscriptions. So what's the idea there?
Well, I mean, certainly data-driven subscriptions is a big part of our plans moving forward, and we're planning to get started on that later this calendar year, within a few months' time. The big thing there is that the way that data-driven subscriptions work in SSRS, this is a perfect example of, I've got to go write my own query by hand. Like there's no GUI or anything, and that probably doesn't translate real well to Power BI in that audience.
Yeah.
So, how do you take that experience or that richness that people have used for years and translate it in a meaningful way to Power BI? One of the things, for example, is, bringing Power Query support to paginated reports and allowing people to write their queries using Power Query. That's something that makes a lot of sense, and we're certainly looking at and acting and adding Power Query support. That's something that we've been actively working on, and I've been fairly open about our plans there. That takes time.
If I would have had that, oh my God, it would be.
No, I mean, I feel the exact same way. I mean, handwriting SQL queries, like, yes, I can do it. It doesn't mean I want to do it. And that's something, just translating that experience, because, we do it for paginated reports. Can this apply to Power BI reports? Because people want it for that as well. And that's something, making sure that experience we build works across both and makes sense in Power BI, and is still providing a scenario where it's a very rich experience. And also, customers run, huge farms to generate hundreds of thousands of reports at once. We have to make sure that we have the bandwidth in Power BI to go handle that in terms of the back-end architecture for those types of scenarios. And that doesn't make sense from a cost perspective. We have Power Automate support. What's that?
That was a big problem with the original reporting services that we put in the cloud, right?
Yes.
It just didn't scale well, and we've definitely learned lessons from that, and that's definitely why they look at it.
Yes, and it's something which, cost is always top of mind, and there's a lot, because reporting services is included with every version of SQL, including Express. There's a very broad base of customers that are used to a very specific price point, and yes, data-driven subscriptions is so limited to enterprise. The enterprise SKU, but it is something where even that, when you're looking at, say, Power BI Premium and the cost there, you have to make sure it makes sense. And again, a lot of people have premiums and very much want to use paginated reports there and data-driven subscriptions. We have Power Automate support, so they can effectively do the same thing. It's not quite as elegant as having it in product, but they have an option. And certainly I've seen people doing that, but it's, we want to bring it natively to the product in a way that makes sense from a Power BI perspective.
It's very exciting, I must say.
Yeah.
So what about creating reports? So obviously we do it with report builder SDT today, but that is also pretty old.
Yes, I mean, as an AS guy, you're well aware of SSDT being very long in the tooth.
Yeah.
and modernizing that experience for a Power BI desktop authoring audience is something that we've received a ton of feedback on. I mean, it was the fastest way we could get an authoring experience in Power BI was to add report builder support. So that's what we did initially, but we're very focused on a web-based authoring experience, and that's just going to take time. But
Yeah.
the biggest part of that is kind of we need to bring the richness of all you can do with Report Builder or SQL Server data tools into the web, but that's going to take years. And so it'll be an incremental journey. And the first part of that is how can we ease users into that? Because oftentimes they have very simple reporting requirements. Like if you think about the 80-20 scenario as a PM, where you're trying to optimize for the 80%, giving people an effective way to go and build a table or a matrix or a tablix, as it's known.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yes, and the some text boxes. That's effectively you're talking about the vast majority of reports already in reporting services. So giving people an easy on ramp to that if they're used to using desktop and some drag and drop type experience or a very simple wizard like experience. I don't want to say it's a wizard per se, but thinking about how we can redo that and while still bringing the richness that certain authors and longtime RS users are looking for is certainly a challenging balancing act to manage. But the team is up to
I
it.
mean,
It's a great team of engineers, and
you can
they're
script
working very hard on
anything. You can
that.
script
Yes,
anything. So that's
yes, anything you
that's
want. But
cool.
it's incredibly powerful.
Yes.
Yes, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I love it. And so let's say I'm a Power BI developer today, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
new.
Okay.
Where do I go to learn? Because there's probably a lot of things out there. What would you
Yes.
suggest?
Well, I think if you're brand new to Paginated Reports, I would definitely recommend the Paginated Reports in a Day web video series that's on the Power BI YouTube channel. I give Peter Myers, who's the author of this course, a lot of credit. So we went and built this course out back in end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and Peter pushed me to go and do a studio recording time, like a full day of recording these things as segmented videos. And I was kind of reluctant. I'm like, this is an instructor-led course. This was mid-February 2020. And actually, Peter had just flown in and he had finished quarantine for COVID at that time in Australia. And I was still like, wow, maybe this thing is more serious than I thought. We went and recorded it, and then everything kind of shut down, like as soon as we released it. And so thank God we did that because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to use any of the content we created for months and months. And instead, it's a very powerful way to kind of dig into the content. You can, it's very consumable in terms of each section. You can pick and choose once you've gone through it once to kind of go and relearn, like, remember about parameters, how do I do certain things there? What about setting up, the concept of a data source and a data set in a paginated report? So we've actually had an updated module since then where we've talked about some of the new capabilities that are coming. We'll update that 3-4 times a year with additional things that continue to come to the Power BI service for paginated reports. But that's where I would start. And then there's a ton of additional things. I mean, Guy in the Cube channel, Patrick LeBlanc's done a number of things around paginated reports. Any of the old SSRS content, or especially around authoring, is still
Yeah.
valuable and oftentimes will translate. It may require subtle changes, and there's a PM on my team, this mystery PM that has started a blog where he's redoing some of the stuff. Actually, Jason Thomas was an MVP at the time and now works at Microsoft, said, sure, you can take my old blog stuff and just redo it for paginated reports. He started doing that, and he's done some really cool examples like doing word cloud and stuff like that. So it's really neat stuff that's out there. So the first place I would start is definitely Paginated Reports in the Day, that video series on YouTube, Power BI.
Awesome. Yeah, of course, there's lots
Yep.
of books written and all of these things in the past, but yeah,
Yes.
it's definitely a good place to
Yeah.
start. And then, most of these books, the majority of, like, I would probably say 75% of it is still applicable. So that's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
In fact, you mentioned books. I'd be amiss this. Paul Turley had this book about SSRS recipes or authoring recipes. He's redoing all of those on his blog. It's an ebook as paginated reports in the Power BI service. So that's another place. Paul Turley's blog is another great place to get that content.
yeah, I mean, I've been following
Yeah.
Paul. I was looking at Paul's blogs when I was doing
Yes.
SSRS. So he's
Yeah.
definitely been
I,
around and very
same with me.
knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yes. Same for me. I love Paul.
So the future of paginated reports. What are you most excited about?
I think for me, the thing I'm most excited about is what some people have like. I'm super excited about the new Paginated Report visual, which you're going to be seeing very soon. It's really bringing together operational reports and Power BI reports in a way that no other company can match. And this is something that, I kind of mentioned offhanded on a Saturday morning on the Guy in Cube show. And Chris Wagner, one of our MVPs, kind of ran with it on LinkedIn, and the response to it was so overwhelming that we prioritized starting work on that almost immediately. And he did a follow-up blog post just like, "Hey, it's coming soon." And again, the response was overwhelming. So I'm almost concerned that people are expecting too much from this. But as I've played with it a bit. We're very close to having something that we'll be able to share publicly. And it's very exciting because for the first time you can just take, if you're familiar with the concept of subreports, I know you are, but if your viewers are, this idea of embedding a report inside of another report, that's been around in SSRS for years, but now you can have a paginated report embedded in your Power BI desktop report, and you can connect your parameter values for your paginated report to the different, filters and slicers or fields on your Power BI report. And if you interact with either cross-highlighting or slicer or filter, it'll update your paginated report at the same time. So it provides a ton, opens up a ton of scenarios there in terms of, having those two things, banking statement, or I've got some pie charts and then a list of all my transactions. I can have that on a single view in my Power BI report. There's just so many different things you can do with it. I know people are already thinking about some ways they can use it with bookmarks and, rolling over stuff. And again, because you're connected live to the data source, if you have a Power Apps visual that you're entering data and you can connect your paginated report right to a Dataverse object, you could see the data updated there right away as well. So there's so many things you can do with that, and the excitement in the community is kind of off the charts around this. So I'm really, really excited to get that in front of people here in the next couple months.
Actually, I even forgot about that, but now I'm excited. So after this, we should talk because I want to play with it.
Okay, no, absolutely. That's been great to see the community reaction to that.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. All right, so let's talk about Power BI Report Server.
Okay.
So we started Power BI Report Server a little bit later than we started with Power BI, right? Because there was a lot of customers who didn't want to move to the cloud but wanted to have that functionality. That's really Power BI Report Server in a nutshell, right? But it's actually more, because it is Power BI artifacts or Power BI desktop support for SSRS. Is that a good way to?
Yes, so I think one of the interesting things with Power BI Report Server is it is SQL Server reporting services under the cover with Power BI and Excel, but that's not many people necessarily take advantage of that, but it does exist. The ability to kind of surface the Power BI reports in effectively SSRS, but it's been rebranded Power BI Report Server to better align with the messaging around Power BI. And we never went and designed, if we wanted to bring Power BI as is on-prem, we would have never built Power BI Report Server that way. The idea was, and I think Frank Weigel, our marketing, effectively did this blog post back in like 2015. We talked about kind of the roadmap, and it was like, hey, look, for organizations that aren't ready to go to the cloud, we're going to have this thing where you're going to surface, at the time we were saying we're going to surface your Power BI reports in SQL Server reporting services. We ended up rebranding that particular piece. But this was always meant to be a stepping stone. It's something on the path to the Power BI cloud. And in fact, that journey has accelerated for a lot of companies, and COVID has driven that quite a bit. So that's where the majority of our investment is going. It continues to go. And we had a blog post last June where we talked about, hey, look, this thing isn't going anywhere, but our focus there is, we'll have the desktop updates that roll into this, 3 times a year. There'll be support for Power BI reports, but ultimately all the innovation and the different things, just from an engineering perspective and where the market's headed, we're focused on the Power BI service. So there isn't a misalignment of expectations there, or, what people are expecting, which is everything that goes into Power BI just comes on-prem. I think we've effectively messaged that over the last few years. That's not going to be what happens, but I know that certainly customers at times can get frustrated with that particular
Of course,
decision.
yeah, it's always a tough choice. And we actually had a podcast on that with Kim too. Like, how do you prioritize? Because
Mhm.
there are so many different things that we can do, and it's not like we have infinite amount of resources at Microsoft.
No, absolutely not. I mean,
So
just
you
think
have to.
about. I mean, you know this better than anyone. I mean, just think about the when you're talking about analysis services or reporting services. You know how SQL Server support works. Like you're supporting versions that are 10 years old for a lot of customers, and the amount of changes across versions and having to go back and fix bugs and do servicing updates for those things, that takes a lot of engineering resources, and
Yeah,
it's a commitment to our customers. When you purchase SQL Server, you get this, so that takes, like, that's a cost for engineering. That's not like we can just say, forget it, we're not going to service those things. So when you're talking about, like, hey, we'd love to do all of these cool things, like as a PM, this is one of these things where you have to go and say, okay, I have these costs here. So, engineering will always tell you, or immediately take X% off the top in terms of your engineering capacity for things like vacation, sickness, job attrition, you name it. And then the servicing costs, then that's your leftover capacity. And then there's always things that crop up in terms of additional unplanned items. And so, yeah, we would, if we had unlimited resources, sure, but unfortunately, that's
yeah,
not the case. And so, from a business priority
makes sense.
perspective, and
But
yeah.
actually, it's interesting. I mean, I've been in my current role for 6 years now, and we definitely saw in the beginning, especially in Europe, way
Mhm.
more Power BI report server, and we see a lot of people now get more hybrid or transitioning more to the Power BI service too. And actually, maybe sometimes it's still a surprise for some customers, but some of the licensing helps here too, right?
Yes, actually, in terms of Power BI Premium, you get use rights to Power BI Report Server, and oftentimes customers have a SQL Server Enterprise agreement, so they're just figure they're licensing it through that. But they actually have core rights to Power BI Report Server if they have a P1, P2, or P3. And you think about that. We added support in 2019 through the XML. If you use the XML endpoint from Power BI Premium, you can use that for your Paginated reports in Power BI Report Server. And I know that there are customers that use that specific scenario to drive data-driven subscriptions. In fact, they use a ton of CPU for that because they're doing these massive bursts of subscriptions from Power BI Report Server. And so there is a hybrid story there now, and you can leverage a benefit that customers may not even realize they already have to drive those types of scenarios. And again, it's perfectly okay to go and say, hey, I need certain functionality in reporting services that isn't there for Paginated reports. Set up Power BI Report Server, and you have the rights to do so, and you have the licensing to do so. And absolutely, it's a use case that people should take advantage of.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask the future, but I think you already talked about it. I mean, we're going to
Yeah.
continue shipping the version of Power BI Desktop 3 times a year, and yeah, and keep on shipping it. But the
Yep.
majority of the focus is going to be on paginated reports, so that people can actually transition. Like, I, it was not just about paginated. Usually, when people didn't want to transition from on-premise to the cloud, it's mostly around security, really other features
Yeah.
than
Exactly.
paginated.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
mean, the amount of investments that Microsoft has made in that area has like significantly moved the needle there, so that more people feel confident that they can move to the cloud. All right.
Yeah. I mean, the attitude is just totally different.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of your other passions, PPU. Uh,
Not sure that's my passion. It was
I,
it was a necessary step in growing the Paginated report business.
I definitely think it's one of your passions, Chris. I've seen you in internal meetings where you are very passionate about it, and
No, no. In fact, but actually, to be fair, I am transitioning the premium per user stuff to another PM here in a few days. So I took this on because it was something. Something. So I'm assuming everybody knows what premium per user PPU is: the ability to go license the premium capabilities on a per user basis. So as we redid the back end of premium, re-architected effectively the entire thing, it gave us a lot of additional flexibility in terms of the what SKUs we could offer certain features at. And so there was a ton of feedback from the community, like, hey, you know, we'd love to use Paginated reports and some of these other features. We can't afford $5,000 a month, and just doesn't make economic sense for them to do so. And so when you're talking about small and medium-sized businesses, it was for 2 years I heard this, and so there was an internal kind of working group with some other folks you're familiar with. I mean, Hayden Richardson is somebody who was very, very important as part of this whole effort to go and we work with marketing and business planning. We go and did this study, and feedback was yes, there's an opportunity here to kind of offer premium on a per user basis. And so going and kind of driving, getting that into the product and learning all the different things you have to do in Microsoft to launch a SKU. I'm very proud of the work that we did, and I'm very happy to do so. It's not something I'm dying to do again. Launching a SKU is very, very time consuming and a lot of work, and there's a lot of moving parts. I'm thrilled of how it turned out and how it came together and landing the pricing on all that, but it was a lot of work, and it's not something that I set out to do in my PM role. But that's one of the things is you try to solve business problems, and you go where you need to do that.
I mean, I can relate because in the SQL Server 2016 release, I don't know if you remember, I was the PM who moved Tabular. It was before that only Enterprise Edition.
Yes,
To also
that's right.
be able to be in Standard Edition.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, no, and I had similar conversations about some of the stuff that was only enterprise for reporting services, moving that down. It was funny, some of those conversations and how they went, and they didn't ultimately lead anywhere, but the feedback and how challenging that is to go do. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, so, but it makes sense because there's a lot of money involved. So
yes.
So maybe we can talk a little bit more about PPU. So it is allowing you to give you the capabilities of all the premium capabilities per user, right? Or almost.
It's effectively, so it's all the premium capabilities, save you don't get all the flexibility you get with, say, BYOK. Like if you encrypt the entire, like bring your own key. So if you encrypt the entire tenant, it works for that, but you don't have the same flexibility to do it on a per capacity basis. The other is multi-geo, because it's a per user license, that the way that multi-geo works right now on the back end, it doesn't really make sense for premium per user. So if they ever change how those features potentially work or are architected, they could potentially show up there. But and then unlimited distribution. I mean, one of the biggest things with this SKU was it could not disrupt the current premium business model. That's been very successful. It's been widely adopted. I mean, for a lot of the members of the Power BI community on social media, premium is far more expensive than what they could afford. But it's been very popular at large organizations. It's a big part of Power BI's success. So it would not make, people often complain like, oh, I want to let pro users go and access content that I create for premium per user. It would destroy our entire business model. I mean, it's as simple as that. We just, as an organization,
if you pay $20 or something for one license that you can distribute to everyone, then that would be it.
Yeah, that would be it. I mean, we just didn't do it like other companies did. But Tableau and others have that type of tiered licensing, and we went in a different direction. We did it like SQL did with per core licensing, and it's been very successful. And so that was part of the challenge in crafting this. Was I spent a lot of time talking to the field. What would make sense and not disrupt your emotions around premium, and they were very instrumental in landing not only this SKU but the price point in terms of like how it would help grow the Power BI business and turn into premium capacity sales over time as well. And it was it's something. So it's basically all the capabilities there, but you don't get the unlimited distribution. Each user has to have a premium per user license if they're accessing content in that workspace or app. So that's just the big thing, and it works like pro. That's
what about subscriptions? I mean, I got this question on Twitter, so I did a Twitter ask what questions to ask. One was Power Query, which you already answered. And this one was about subscribing to non-PPU users.
So you can subscribe a pro user to a subscription in a premium per user workspace just because everybody's getting the same attachment. It doesn't make a lot of sense to block that because Kasper subscribes himself and then sets up an Outlook rule that goes to 40 people. So that we're not really jeopardizing revenue with that scenario. So that is allowed for Paginated reports. It's a great chance to go and have one person get a premium user license, subscribe 10 pro users, and as long as they're not coming back to the portal, that is allowed because they all get the same report. Now, we talked about data-driven subscriptions earlier. That would not be allowed in that same scenario where we would block pro users from being able to take advantage of that. And so there is the one use case today with, yes, you can subscribe other pro users, but it's just because everybody gets the same attachment. We didn't think it made sense to go and proactively block that.
Makes sense. So who have you been seeing using PPU now? Like, is it?
It's very much smaller organizations, and it's certainly, you see some viral adoption at larger organizations, because oftentimes you'll have different groups that just they use SSRS standard. It's the old hey, there's a server under a desk somewhere, and trying to get access to a premium capacity at a large organization isn't necessarily very easy. Even at Microsoft, for folks, it was very difficult. And so until we gave everybody in the organization premium per user to start using, not a ton of people were using Paginated Reports and some of these other features. And now that everybody has access to it, they can kind of go and take advantage of that. We've seen growth happen internally to help, provide feedback and understand bugs before they reach public. But it's generally, it was designed for small and medium-sized companies. And oftentimes it's just a simple math thing. Like $5,000 a month equals P1. What is, 250 users or less? Premium per user makes more sense. Beyond that, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and actually, maybe one more question. Like, I think where it's also different, which you sometimes hear some confusion about, is data set size. Obviously, when you buy a P3, you get, I don't know exactly how much memory, but you get 250 gigs or 200 gigs or something.
Yeah, well, now that the architecture is different, the model size you can have per model is up to 100 gig. Now, in general, people are nowhere near that size of a model. And it's truly, memory isn't how this is kind of driven with the new premium Gen 2 architecture. So in theory, yes, you could have a bunch of 100 gig models that people are all accessing with premium per user workspace. Now, each person is accessing it needs a PPU license, even if you're just accessing it through the XML endpoint. And so I think that this is one of these things where people are like, oh, well, I'll run out of memory. It isn't working like it does with the current, premium Gen 1. Like, it's not effectively a VM behind the scenes. And I'm oversimplifying it, but it's not just a VM behind the scenes that has this much memory, and then all the workloads are competing for that memory. Memory is now spread across all the different workloads. So Paginated Reports don't contend with analysis services models or the AutoML. They're running in separate nodes, but then your CPU is calculated and you're billed that way. So you're allowed a certain amount of CPU. And then, so one of the nice things about premium per user, you don't have to worry about that. Now, for larger deployments, you're going to be paying a lot more, but if you don't want to deal with that complexity, that isn't.
And that makes things easier. So maybe one of the maybe almost last question is, what are you most excited about to work on that you can share? Obviously, you cannot share everything, but going forward.
Well, I mentioned the Paginated Report visual. The web authoring stuff, I think, is really exciting. There's a ton of things we can do there. There's a lot of stuff in the managed distribution space. If you think about some of the different things, mention data-driven subscriptions, but think about things like alerting and some of the additional options that we can offer people to, bring reports and information to where they live. There's a lot of push around Teams today, having things surface in Teams and those channels through a subscription. And just there's a lot of neat things we can do. And again, probably the thing I'll be most excited about in a few months' time is something I don't even realize will land on my plate right now, because things are always changing and team always are getting new things added. But just seeing since the beginning of this year, we've seen a huge uptake in Paginated Reports, and obviously premium per user has certainly driven a lot more breadth in terms of the adoption. And how enterprise deployments go, or how deployments of these things go, is for a while it's like a couple of users and all of a sudden there's a huge spike because they deploy. And so what's going to happen is, go
ahead.
No, I was going to say that's what happens here. One of the things that's going to happen is, okay, we've been, now we've effectively, tripled our usage in the last few months. So that's a fairly big deal when you talk about, hey, the support burden, and then a lot of the things that people are looking for, making sure perf is up to snuff, and a lot of these more, it may sound mundane, but guess what? That's a huge part of a PM's job, is to anticipate these things and make sure that we're properly accounting for them when we go think about all the different things we need to do and support. So there's a lot of, I think the thing I'm most excited about is just seeing the excitement in the community and all the different things that I know are coming, that, just more people asking for more stuff is always exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And people getting excited and actually seeing usage of your the products that you work on is pretty exciting. All right.
Yep.
So maybe one last question. Anything interesting that you want to share with us? Any last words of wisdom?
Last words of wisdom. So I think one of the things, I know you've talked about, being a program manager, you have to have very thick skin, because you're never going to satisfy everybody. Somebody is angry at a decision you make, no matter what.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, premium per user, the price announcement there is probably the one example I can give where I didn't see at least publicly, I didn't see anybody complaining about that. But in general, when I'm choosing features or making product trade-offs, inevitably I'm disappointing somebody. And that's hard to get used to, because when you're in the field, you're super focused on that group of customers, and you're trying to do anything, and there's always a customer or someone that's going to be disappointed with some decision you've made, and managing that and those relationships, I think, is one of the hardest things people have to, if they're interested in being a program manager, is understanding, how you'll end up disappointing people, and having to deal with that, and learning to deal with that was actually pretty hard for me. So it's something I've come to accept, and I hate disappointing customers, but ultimately, it's just a different mindset from what I was doing before.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I remember it was actually in my interview when I interviewed for Microsoft with John Hancock. He asked me
Mhm.
questions to make sure, because I was a consultant, and as a consultant, you really are there to please the customer, one customer,
Yes,
not
yes,
many customers. And he was trying to
yes.
figure out. He made me design. Back then, we didn't have any tabular model as
Hmm.
SMS. He made me design what it should look like on the
Hmm.
whiteboard, and he was happy with me making some choices again that would probably not make everyone happy, but the majority of the
No,
users. And I agree, it's super hard,
it
but it's
is.
a lot
It's
of fun.
tough, and yeah, it is. It's fun, but yeah, that was the thing that I think was the biggest challenge for me. So,
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So, Chris, I really want to thank you for your time. We've learned a
no, my
lot.
pleasure.
Paginated reports, where we're going. There's a lot of life in it, even though it's already 18. It's almost allowed to drink in the US.
No, 21. 21 in the
Sorry.
US, 18 in
Yeah,
Canada.
almost.
There you
So 3 year will
go.
definitely make it. 18,
Yeah.
it can definitely drink in Europe for sure. No
Oh yeah,
problem.
that's true. Very true.
But it's yeah. Thanks a lot. We've learned a lot, and definitely I'm very excited too. Actually, about the custom visual or the visual that has paginated reports running inside of Power BI, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So with that,
Oh,
I want
awesome.
to thank you a lot for your time, and
Okay.
I'll
Thank you, Casper.
talk to you soon.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.
And that concludes another episode of Kasper On BI. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely did. I talking about paginated reports, learning from Chris on what's happening and what we're thinking about. If you like this episode, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to know more. With that, I want to thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.